One of the more modern solutions, especially because it conforms to the wall, is to do
carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber, yes. Epoxy
you glue
and
carbon fiber strips to your basement wall.
Yeah, hey, why not, right?
I know why not. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Digital Brand Manager Rob Hvac.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Pontalillo, Editorial Director.
Hey, y'all.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being on the show today.
Anytime.
Yeah, good morning.
Rob, you're still working on your basement floor. I saw some photographs yesterday that looks like you had a very heavy-duty vapor retarder put down, and then it looks like you were putting XPS over that, and then some sleepers to put an OSB subfloor on top of that. Why?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before. I had started this project years ago and was going to just do a little corner of my basement, but then you and I have argued a bit over what the best thing to do to my nasty rat slab basement floor was a bunch of times, and I finally just determined that this was just the easiest, most comfortable route. So basically, the whole basement eventually would be covered with a thick layer of polyethylene, taped at the seams, going up the edges of the assembly a little bit on the sides to make it into like a nice, tidy, self-contained unit. But I've changed the tactics a bit over the years. I used to just put strips of 1/2-inch foam under the sleepers just to sort of give them a little bit of a thermal break from the slab. But now I did a full sheets of 1/2-inch on the floor, then the sleepers, then infilled with 1.5 inches. And because my basement floor is so wonky, I actually shimmed. I took my a big level and I had Michelle stand on the sleeper so they weren't popping up all over the place, and I just shimmed until the thing felt pretty solid. And once I put sheets of Advantech over the top of it and caulked all the seams, it's just nice and solid.
What happens if you have a pipe burst or a flood? What the heck?
What happens if you have a pipe burst on the main floor of your house? It gets wet. I mean, think about it this way. It's going to be, all the seams are sealed. It's going to be painted with porch paint. It's going to be sealed at the edges to the foundation wall. So chances are, if I have a pipe burst, I'm going to have plenty of time before there's any chance of any of that water seeping down into this assembly and making a mess. And so think about, all these people.
I think we should do an experiment.
Okay, I'll try it out. I'll try it out. I mean, you got to wait till I'm completely done with the project, but I'll dump some buckets of water down there.
I think it looks great. It's very tight. You've done nice work.
Thanks. And it's just a joy to work on. I mean, like I hated, to work on the space afterwards. Like it's because I never thought I would make a workshop space in my nasty basement, but in the winter, it's just tough to be out in my garage because it's not in my barn. It's not heated. And I've actually been doing projects like crazy, like all around the house and working on bikes. And because this is going to be the place when, Michelle and I get tired of each other in a few years. I start hiding out down in that basement and just tinker with projects. And
she's going to put a lock on the door.
There already is one.
Rob, you and Michelle have been together a long time. It's interesting that you're assuming you're going to get tired of each other in a few years.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see what she says about this episode. No, not tired of each other. We just we like to have our time to do our own things once in a while. She read a book. I'll go build a bicycle. So,
Jeff, what have you been doing?
Nothing related to home building stuff.
You still cleaning up the landscape?
Well, I haven't. I've been working on another project, unrelated. So.
Do you look forward to stuff this weekend? It's supposed to be pretty nice.
Yeah. It'll be good to get outside.
Brian, what have you been doing?
Well, I've been working really hard this week, as I think, everyone has, on the next issue of Fine Homebuilding, which is a themed issue, and the themes kind of similar, but a little subtly different, are energy efficiency, building science, and sustainability. And it really is a pretty dynamite issue. I'm really looking forward to people getting it and hearing from readers. It's just really, it's not, it's going to be very much like any issue of Fine Homebuilding, because there's all sorts of different topics in it, but all sort of relating to one of those themes. And so we've got an article on a kind of a novel approach to insulating a cathedral ceiling or vaulted ceiling, which is always a tricky thing to get done and squeeze the right R value and air sealing and vapor profile into it. So I think people are going to really enjoy that approach. It's also got a fascinating venting technique that allows you to vent an entire roof despite dormers and valleys and hips and all these things that usually make venting difficult, if not impossible. So I'm looking forward to the response to that article. We've got a really...
Who wrote that, Brian?
That was Josh Salinger, Bird's Mouth Design Build out in Portland, Oregon. Really smart guy. I mean, he's been getting involved with Fine Homebuilding over the past year. I think this might be his first article, but he's been featured on the Keep Craft Alive page. We've had some videos from his projects that you can find on YouTube and on our website. He's someone worth paying attention to. His company does really, really great work.
So people are going to be wondering how you're venting a roof with valleys and hips and what have you. So
I'm not going to give it away. Check it out in the article. It's really cool. And
we never do cliffhangers on this show. That's kind of fun.
Well, we're gonna have to wait. Maybe listeners can check it out and then can write in their thoughts, and we can talk about it at that point. I'd rather have other builders and designers and architects, debating this approach.
Pick it apart, right?
That's what we do. Us. And then we got a really deep article on all things HVAC. Great sort of builder's guide to HVAC, right? So everything you should kind of know, even if you're not a HVAC engineer or technician, the stuff that you want to know as you're integrating these systems into your homes. We got another mechanical story that you worked on, Patrick, on dedicated dehumidification. Not only talks about why that's becoming more common in homes in this country, but also solutions for dedicated whole house, in many cases, whole house dehumidification. And then just lots of, we've got a passive house that has, great expanses of north facing glazing, which is, so how do you do that?
Right.
Well, you got to read the article. And just a bunch of other great stuff that I'm really excited about.
Why haven't we done this in the past? I agree with you. I think it's a really solid issue. What spawned it recently?
Well, some changes. People will note that over the years we have done less design content in Fine Homebuilding, and that is all. And even though probably a lot of people listening to this are going to say, "No, I love the design content," because whenever we hear that anecdotally, but through our research, we found that it's the least desirable and least favorite content of our readers. And so we've tried to strengthen, the issues that we're giving to readers with topics that our research shows that they're more interested in. So we are not doing, over the past couple of years, we've changed the nature of the houses issue to the point where last year, and I didn't work on it last year, so I can't talk about the decision here, but last year it was like a hybrid issue. Mm-hmm. It was like a core issue of Fine Homebuilding with some of the houses stuff in it. And this year we just decided, let's try a different theme. And so that's why this year we're doing that. And in the fall, we're going to replace the kitchen and bath issue with an issue focused on interior finish. So trim carpentry and cabinetry and things like that. So, just trying to really give our readers what they're telling us that they want the most.
Cool.
And we're going to find other ways to do design content. So that's coming down the road too. We're going to get more of it going, and we just got to find some different ways to do it.
Well, I hope you all check out that issue because it is chock full of good stuff for sure. As always, we've got some great feedback from our listeners. This is from Matt. Hi, FHB Podcast. Wanted to start out by saying I love the show and have been listening to every episode. I'm an electrical engineer working in the power sector and an avid DIYer. I listen intently every time you mention energy efficiency and almost wrote a month ago when you mentioned converting a gas stove to electric. I just received this article in an engineering magazine I read. It's quite fascinating and shocking. The long and short of it is, in the 50s, we were using energy at about 50% efficiency, and now we're around 32% and heading in the wrong direction. This gets me back to the electric stove you were considering. Let's say that the electric oven is more efficient than the gas stove. This ignores the fact that electricity had to come from some fuel source. If it's coming from natural gas, the most efficient natural gas generator is about 44% efficient. So 56% of that potential energy is going up the flue, and your electric stove would have to be over twice as efficient as the gas stove. The numbers I found don't show that increase in efficiency. I know part of that topic was about indoor air pollution or indoor air quality, and I do think that needs to be addressed, but electrification is not the answer. The bigger issue is how we live. I was out in Palm Springs a while ago staying with a friend. Yes, I flew, and I'm aware how much energy that used. My friend turned on the oven to cook dinner while it was over 100 degrees out, and of course the AC was on, so the AC had to remove not just the heat it would normally have to, but also the heat the oven was giving off. We all know people who do this. That's why our efficiency is going in the wrong direction. No one in the 1950s had the AC on while the oven was on too. You've mentioned wind power as a potential solution. Watch out, wind isn't producing nearly as much as you think, especially in New England. ISO New England has the data on its website, and I've never seen wind above 1 or 2%. It's not the perfect solution that a lot of people think it is. Changing subjects, it would be fascinating to have your guests pretend they're a carpenter or architect 100 years in the future and have to repair what we're installing now. I can't help but think that all the OSB layers with self-adhesive WRB or whatever on it will not be nearly as repairable as the material installed decades and centuries ago. I also don't think the adhesive being used will hold up over a time period that many houses are expected to last. What data is that zip system, seam tape, or a paintable WRB will last 200 years. Keep up the good work and I look forward to more great podcasts. Matt from Chicago. So what do you guys think? He makes a good point. We're not using energy, or we're not even making it as efficiently as we used to.
Well, I took a look at the article that he cited, and another one of the big reasons in the article was the fact that we use transportation a lot more, and more people own vehicles and more people take airplane flights than they used to. So part of it is also just that represents a larger percentage of our energy usages, and cars are not as efficient as other uses of energy in our world. And it reminded me of a report I saw a while ago, and I went and found a more recent one about whether it makes sense to have an electric car in different parts of the country, and
based on
where you're getting the power from. And on the West Coast, from an environmental standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to have an electric car. But on the East Coast, because our electric grid is cleaner, it actually could potentially do more damage than good to drive an electric car.
You said because our electric grid is cleaner?
Yeah. Wait. Actually, I can't remember exactly the reasoning behind it, but I think it had something to do with the amount of pollution and the concentration of pollution that gasoline cars were creating. But there are just different places in the country where it makes more or less sense if you're worried about it more from an environmental standpoint than just an economic one.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, this is such complex stuff, and what Rob just said made me think, like, really, if we're talking about climate change and environmental issues, how clean energy production and uses is the only thing that matters. Efficiency doesn't matter, and costs don't matter. It's about how clean it is. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what's going to make a difference when it comes to the climate stuff. So that's it. right? I guess the question that would be great to have answered is, how do we get there? How do we get to really clean energy? And obviously it's not going to work if it's not affordable.
Right.
So it's that has to be a factor. That's just a big question. And his second comment, I think, is also
we've talked about this before, right?
It's also a great question.
Yeah.
Like, I am all for going forward with techniques that make our houses more comfortable, more efficient. I don't think anyone wants to go back to a leaky house, and also a house that frankly needs to be repaired all the time, because just because a house is repairable doesn't mean that it's not low maintenance necessarily, if you're building in such a way that it's always taking maintenance and repair. So it's a great question. It's a great thing to think about. And I agree with them. That's why, one of the things that I never get excited about, even if I find them interesting, I never get excited about the potential of real novel things. The T-stud's really interesting, but it's so novel. It's that is a carpenter in 20 years gonna know what the heck to do when he cuts into a wall that uses the T-stud? I don't know. Certainly, I mean, I think we could all agree that the answer is no, unless they really get adopted and start getting used. So
we've
lots
had
of things like this.
We've had conversations about what it's going to be like to work on houses with closed cell spray foam as the primary insulation material. Like, getting stuff apart with that in there sounds miserable, right?
Yeah. Is zip system going to last? I don't know.
Yeah.
The building industry sure has adopted it wholesale, but that doesn't mean anything.
And we know gravity is going to work forever, but we don't know adhesives are going to work forever, right?
Right.
One thing, Brian, to your point, to take that a little further, if you look at what he was talking about, cooking in a house in Palm Springs with the air conditioning on, and that's why houses, 100 years ago had summer kitchens, because nobody wanted to be cooking in the middle of their house in the middle of the summer. They'd have a separate place where they're cooking. Hey, if you have a nice outdoor kitchen, go cook out there in the summer. Go throw your roast in the oven in your little outdoor covered kitchen in Palm Springs instead of heating up your house, right?
Yeah.
I think it's unreasonable to tell people to turn off their oven because they're running the air conditioning. That's when you need it.
But really what it comes down to is that it's like we have demand for certain behavior. There's certain behaviors that we want to just continue doing, and there's certain goods and activities that we want to continue, paying for and enjoying, and saving energy or building better structures is one thing, but not doing any of that stuff at all is actually really a lot better than trying to find a slightly better way to do something that's damaging.
Yeah, and changing behavior, and he alludes to this. Changing behavior is a viable solution, right? I mean, you can do a lot of things to be more efficient with your hot water usage, or you can do things just as you always did and take a shorter hot shower. So human behavior is part of the equation, and that's where it comes down to. I mean, a lot of it comes down to individual choice until it gets mandated in the building codes and whatnot. But certainly with, we can all make the decision to minimize our consumption.
Well, we heard from some folks on our holy grail of content, which is making a split level home look more attractive. And this comes from Ken. Hi, folks. I sympathize with Adam's challenge making a split level home look updated. First of all, split level living does have its advantages. When we had young kids, we could give them some space, but also be able to hear if any of them lost a limb or something like that because I left a power tool lying around. And normally my goal in renovating houses is to keep it true to its original style using salvaged materials and try not to glue on non-native elements, transforming it into something it isn't. But in the case of the house we renovated, we needed an additional bedroom, and the rest of the neighborhood in this Massachusetts seacoast town could support a transformation into something different. While I'm showing you the exterior, we also did remove hundreds of feet of clamshell molding and replaced it with proper-sized colonial or square profile trim depending on the room. Starting with many high-quality, well-proportioned replacement windows helped. The prior owner had installed Anderson 400s with add-on muntins, so we removed the lowers and even replaced the full screens with half screens. The architect knew that adding a front porch and evening out the roof line, removing the brick facade, the bay window, raising the chimney, and using Nantuckets on the front to match the white cedar on the rest of the house helped complete the transformation. I know we're not fooling anyone with this renovation, but we do think we have hid many of the split-level features we did not like. What do you think? Here is before, during, and after. What do you think?
He hit on some really great things that we talked about last time. Is that it is like proportion and material choices are two of the biggest things you can do really for any house, not just a split level house. That original facade he had this kind of awkward little brick facade with a bay window that didn't really match anything, and a strange little bump out that seemed to be for no apparent reason. And by putting that porch on and changing to a consistent siding across the whole house, the whole thing ties together so much nicer.
It doesn't look at all like a split level anymore, I would say, even though it still is, right? The entryway is at the midpoint of the elevations. It's cool. It looked great.
Yeah.
We didn't like bash split level houses, did we? I remember mentioning them, but we didn't.
No, it was more that the guy, the guy who last time who was writing in was like, these aren't really considered the most attractive houses, and how can
they're often more affordable,
Yeah. How can
because of that reason?
Nicer?
Yeah.
Now the one thing too is that this house started out having some issues with proportions, whereas sometimes the early split level houses might have had nice proportions. They were just in styles or materials that are not popular today. But oftentimes embracing those styles and just doing them justice is the way to go. Like that house that I sent you guys a picture of this morning. It's very different from this house, but it had some nice proportions already, and the people did some nice landscaping, and I don't know, I kind of liked it.
Yeah, and it's nice to. I mean, I like. I'm trying to remember the one you sent this morning. I'd have to go back and look at it, but and that's actually a very interesting split level house. And one of the things that they do often, not always with split levels, is they turn a gable towards the street, right towards the front of the house, as opposed to like most ranches that don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And this one actually is really neat because they turn a hip roof towards the front of the house, and it just adds a lot of visual, architectural interest that a ranch doesn't. Single story ranch doesn't necessarily need it, but as soon as you make that front wall taller, you need, with a low sloped roof, you really start to have a proportionately odd house. So to just turn a gable or a hip towards the front of the house really adds a lot of interest to a ranch style home.
One of the things I meant to mention in our last conversation on this subject was that landscaping can really help a split level house look less tall in the front, which is the thing Brian is touching on.
Yeah.
It makes it look odd sometimes, especially when the door is floating between levels, right? If you can get some landscaping or some other element to bring that more toward the ground, it seems to help a lot.
Yeah, the right stair / porch, or the landscaping, or something to ground it.
And one thing to think about with landscaping is same thing with the facade of a house or even interior decorating, is that scale and proportion are equally as important. Like, putting a row of small perennials along the foundation isn't going to do anything, but doing some nice massing with some shrubs or small trees to sort of mask or soften some of the lines of the house.
We have a great article on that, Rob, that we could put on the show notes page for this episode, and I'll have to. I think.
I'll go look for it. Just tell me roughly
I think
what it is.
massing was in the title though, and it's like such a kind of a jargony term, right? Architecture term, massing. But when you start to understand what that means and how to play with it in design, it all makes a lot of sense, and is really kind of helpful understanding to have.
Yep.
We heard from James, who asked about reduced insulation levels in cooling climates, right? And traditionally, the reason for less insulation in cooling climates is because the delta T is lower, right? To make the house comfortable, you need to change it less than you would in the far north of the country, when it might be 0 out and you're trying to keep the house at 70, right? It's the 70-degree delta T. In the South, it's maybe 100, and you're trying to make the house 70, it's only 30. But we heard from James, and honestly, James's feedback confused me, so I'm hoping you guys can help me out here. In regard to Texas having lower delta Ts, the arguments made in episode 334 ignore the temperature differential across the insulation. Comparing outdoor temp to indoor temp isn't accurate. When the sun radiates upon a roof deck and drives the surface temperature up in the attic, you have a lot bigger delta T across the insulation. In New York, on one of the houses I had about 3 inches of closed cell foam on the underside of the roof deck. The interior side of the insulation rose up to 90 to 100 degrees on sunny days. Well, at least it did before the solar panels went over most of the roof. If you have an attic at 150 degrees, the differential will be 70. Not much different than northern states. In fact, they may really need more insulation than us northerners or deal with the radiant energy. A good argument can be made for installing metal roofs with air gaps/vent channels and radiant barriers underneath for this reason. James signs off as home performance expert. What do you guys think of this? Is he right? Have I been missing the boat on this very subject?
I mean, the one thing is, I, not being from the South and only having anecdotal, evidence of the differences between attic temperatures and our situation up here up north. How hot do attics get? Like, what is the hottest an attic gets in Texas or in Arizona? I mean, I should have looked into that before we got online this morning. But
I think it's easy to assume it's at least 120 degrees on a sunny day, right? On a hot sunny day.
Yeah, so I mean, really, that's why a lot of people do focus on radiant barriers down there, down south, where you don't really hear much about that up here, because certainly everything you can do to shade or reflect that heat back out of the attic before it gets to your ceiling and goes into your house is probably the best scenario as far as I can tell.
But so, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. The building science researchers have told us that more insulation is a better bang for your buck than radiant barriers, and all but the new homes with it attached to the sheathing, because there's no additional labor and the cost is minimal, right? So they tell us that your money is better spent putting more insulation in the attic than putting up radiant barriers. And we've had some pushback from folks in southern climates who say it makes the attic a lot more comfortable, but I still maintain that the research indicates that insulation is a better bet.
Insulation and air sealing, I think have more bang for the buck than radiant barriers. Radiant barriers work if installed properly, but that's my understanding. There's no reason not to use them. But to use them knowing, maybe after you've already insulated and air sealed properly. He mentions 3 inches of closed cell foam in insulating an attic in New York, which obviously isn't nearly enough insulation.
Right.
Where current international residential code calls for R49, I believe, and most high performance builders would say that's not even enough.
Right, and he's got maybe R18, right?
Right.
With closed cell foam.
So that's why the attic temp is so high. It's not a properly insulated attic unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I'm confused by this too, and maybe someone who's listening to the show can weigh in on this. But it does make sense if the attic is hotter. That is more energy is going to be moving toward the interior of the home, right? And of course, an attic is going to get hotter than the outdoors because radiation. I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, it is a little confusing because he's talking about the delta T issue and then talking about this hot attic, but he didn't say what the outdoor temperature was at that time that the attic was 90 to 100 degrees. So I'm not sure how it related to the delta T aspect of his comment. So either he could clarify. If he hears this, he could clarify. I'm sure we'd be glad to read his clarification, or maybe someone else can chime in.
It's a good question, right?
And one thing, Brian, you mentioned is air sealing, which he doesn't bring up at all. And it's like the one thing that people, I think, miss a lot of times is when you've got an unfinished space that's sort of in your house, like an unfinished attic. air sealing is probably the most important thing you can do, because you don't think about the fact that you've got gaps between wall plates, you've got ceiling lights, you've got attic hatches, you've got all sorts of things that are the main source for heat leaking into that house before you even get to the insulation.
Yeah.
So John Paul writes in, I had a bad experience with a plumber recently. You talk about great contractors all the time. What do you do about the many, many bad ones out there, and how do you avoid them and find the good ones that care? I contacted a plumber and we spoke over the phone. I sent pictures of a sewer job via email. I was getting sewer gas escaping from a ruined lid on a sewer ejector tank in the basement. They ordered a specialty part tank cover that I could not order. They did not like the caulk used in the pictures and said I would need a new metal lid because modern plastic lids are the wrong size. Basically, the only part I could order was too small and it would need to be retrofitted and impossible to seal. The plumber missed his first appointment because their vehicles couldn't handle a small amount of snow that UPS, USPS, and FedEx all navigated perfectly fine some minutes later. The second appointment came a few weeks later, and the guy shows up unprepared. He doesn't have a vacuum, no gasket material. He has to dig around in his truck for wire grommets and does not have the right size concrete anchors. To clean up after himself, he borrows my shop vac, and I had to vacuum up extra mess after he left. He did not wear shoe covers, leaving mud in my house. The tank lid he installed is the same one I could have ordered, and it is too small and does not fit. He says it's okay, though, because he used a whole tube of caulk to seal it. This is a mess. Have you guys looked at the photos of this? So it's what looks like a steel tank, right? And the lid was rotted, so of course gas was leaking out of it, and I'm sure it stunk terrible. And this guy put this plastic thing on here that didn't fit, and he put silicone around the perimeter to try and seal it.
Yeah,
obviously
and
that's not the right way to do it, right?
And even so, the silicone job looked pretty undone, unfinished.
Mm.
So I hate that we're not having any answers today, but I don't know what to tell you about when you have a bad plumber. It's too late. It's better to find a good one from someone you know who's had good experiences, but I mean that can be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's the question. Is how do you find the good one, right? I mean, it's
no one's saying anything.
Well, I kind of interrupted Brian there. I thought he was going to jump in.
I always wish I had. We've gotten this question a lot, obviously, and in all different forms over the years at Fine Homebuilding, and I always wish I had a better answer. Like there was a resource for good quality contractors, and there's online reviews and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that I ever feel really good about is word of mouth. Yeah. Knowing that someone did good work for someone else, maybe even two or three people can say, yeah, they did good work, so talk to your friends and family and see who they've used. And that just seems like the most surefire approach to getting the right person,
We had Dan Colbert on Pro Talk yesterday, and Dan made the point that these services that do reviews, Yelp, I forget all the other ones for Angie's List is one for contractors, what have you. He's like, they make the claim that it's unbiased, but you're getting better placement if you buy advertising from these companies. So, I question the legitimacy of these rating services because of that. It just seems you can't be both. You can't be unbiased and selling advertisement on your site, right?
Yeah. To the idea of asking for referrals from people. I mean, other homeowners, you might not always find somebody. I mean, even me, I know a lot of contractors, but I don't know a lot of handymen. So when someone asks me, oh, I need a door installed or I need this or that, I don't always have the right answer, even though I've been in this business for so long. But one thing I've actually did when we had our sewer backup on our house, I was calling plumbers I knew. And of course, they don't deal with that stuff. Like they're installing new things in houses. They're not going and fixing this stuff if they can help it. So there are people who specialize in sort of emergency sewer kind of stuff. So it was actually a plumber that I knew who gave me a referral to the sewer repair person. And
you were very happy with their work.
I love their work. Yeah, the guy was great, and It was actually this company called Electric Snake, which is, I think, a regional company around here. And
Isn't that a dance?
yeah, maybe they should do a video. But no, but the thing is, so sometimes getting a referral from another type of tradesperson is actually probably
Right.
not a bad idea, because they're, if they're in the business of doing work on other people's houses, especially if it's a contractor who's building or renovating houses, they're going to try to get the best subcontractors they can for any job that they need done. So they're often the people who know the most high quality tradespeople in your area.
The only good
That's-
way I know of to
good
find
too.
good contractors is, like Brian said, word of mouth. It's just, you have to contact the people that your friends and family have had good experiences with, I think. I don't know what to say about like what to do when you've gone down the road with a bad contractor. Like, I think you got to fix it by finding another one who's good. This comes from Tony. Tony is the second person who's described himself as home performance specialist in our correspondence today. Good afternoon, FHB podcast. I only recently discovered your podcast and am loving it. I started out listening to a few of your more recent ones and decided to go back to episode 1, and I'm working my way through. It's fun to hear the different issues people are faced with, and your knowledgeable answers and discussions. I believed it was episode 2 that you all discussed using I-joists for a roof, which is something I did a couple years ago. It worked great. I bought a second house and it was listed at $75,000, and I was able to get it for $47,500 last year. I knew going in there would be some major foundation issues. I could see the concrete block walls had some bulges and some cracking. The worst wall, after I removed the drywall that was hiding it, was significantly bowed in at the bottom, with rows of blocks actually shifted in a couple of inches. I've excavated behind it, so I'm no longer worried about it collapsing in by soil pressure. However, I do want to replace it. I do not want to replace it. My thought is to install 8 temporary metal columns / posts every 4 feet with a double 2x6 beam above, and lift the pressure off the house, which is take it off the wall, and then I can use the bottle jacks to push the bulge out of the wall and back into position. My plan, once I have it back in place and mostly straight, is to cut the interior concrete slab 6 to 8 inches along the inside of the exterior wall, drill holes in all the blocks so the bottom cavities can drain water that gets inside. It'll drain to an interior French drain and a sump pump. I'll put dimpled drainage barrier for any water that makes it through the block, 2 inches of foam over this, and finally 2x6 stud wall bolted to the floor joist above and to the concrete slab below, so the concrete block wall will no longer be able to move in via ground pressure. I had thought of excavating all around the house and trying to waterproof the concrete block and exterior French drains, but I'm instead leaning toward letting the water in and moving it out via the interior French drains and a sump pump. What do you think of this plan? I've attached a couple pictures of the basement and the front of the new house. I really think the house was a steal, but it's going to be a lot of work. All right. So, what do you guys think? He's got a bulging wall. He wants to jack up the house a little and then use bottle jacks to push the concrete block wall back into position before he puts the house back down.
I mean, I guess it depends on how bad it is, because I mean, bulging masonry is something that people do repair, and you see, oftentimes metal tie beams, bolted through the walls to hold them, and I actually looked this up, and one of the more modern solutions, especially because it conforms to the wall, is to do
carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber, yes. Epoxy
you
and
glue carbon fiber strips to your basement wall.
Yeah, hey, why not, right?
I know why not.
I don't know, but this guy, he's a go-getter, because I mean, he's already excavated the entire outside wall. Did you see the really cool contraption he built to jack to put pressure on, with like these like cantilevered posts and bottle jacks and things? And so I don't think he needs to be asking us for advice. He seems like he's one way or another, no matter what catastrophic failure he might have, he's going to figure out a solution.
Tony's going to fix it, right?
With all the effort and the excavation and jacking that he's already doing, I don't see why he doesn't want to just replace
put
the walls.
put up a new block wall, right?
It seems like he's
Yeah.
doing 75%, putting 75% of the effort in, except for building a new wall or pouring a new wall.
I think so
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can make it much stronger when you do it the second time. It's not going to be any different when he pushes it back. And yeah, maybe with the improved drainage, especially on the outside, it won't be an issue. But gosh, like you said, you've gone this far. Rebuild the wall.
Yeah, I mean it's it's an awful lot of work to basically make the wall so that it's not even supporting the house while you're repairing it. You might as well just
Build a new
knock
wall.
it out of there. Yeah.
And with the assumption that these weep holes are going to and relieving that hydrostatic pressure is going to relieve the problem.
Mhm.
And it might, but that's assuming that the drainage is right, the water is actually being relieved through the weep holes and all that. So
That's the thing about basement wall repairs is that there's so many people say, "Oh yeah, you just got to do a French drain. You just got to do this. You got to do this patch. You got to," and you never know till you put it all back together whether that was the actual problem that you solved. And so yeah, I mean, if you've got the opportunity, you just go as far as you can to get the thing right.
I don't think it would be hard to pour concrete, as Brian suggests too, which has way better resistance to both, water infiltration and is much stronger for soil pressure. So, I mean, and if you don't want to, do all of it at once, maybe a couple pours would make it easier so you don't have to get the concrete in, right up next to the house.
I don't know if this is, I mean, this is a different issue because he has failing foundation walls. But I saw, and we will have in the magazine soon, an article where a builder solved Dan Colbert actually solved a footing problem. Well, actually, it wasn't a problem. The house had no footings, and they wanted to add on to this house, second story, and the house had no. The engineer kind of guessed that this house had no footings based on the era of the house and the location of the house, and the engineer turned out to be right. And they solved the footing problem instead of doing all the work to retrofit footings with helical piers. And what an interesting solution that they could be for lots of failing foundation issues, because they can be drilled in adjacent to the house. And there's so many different ways that they can be attached to the house, to support the structure. I wonder if that's if helical piers are a solution for a bowing or crumbling foundation wall situation as well.
I've seen a number of ways to fix bowed foundation walls. I've seen a builder, Jake Lewandowski, use like I-beams and to buttress bowed walls. But I mean, what's his name? Ken? Tony's already done all the hard part, right?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
those repairs are meant to eliminate the need for excavation and,
Yes.
like Tony.
And he's done it. Yeah.
Tony,
yeah.
you've done the hard part. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. And just for clarity, because I realized when I jumped to the helical piers, it's not a solution. It's not fixing the bowed wall problem. It's just replacing the need for that foundation system. It becomes no longer would your foundation walls be the structural support for your house. The piers would be.
The helical piers are not good at holding basement soil back, though. Like, he needs a wall there too, for soil pressure, right?
Sure, to keep the basement from being caved in. Yes,
Filled with dirt.
Yes.
Jeff, what do you think about this? You're a practical guy.
No, I agree. It's like he's done the work. It's like trying to put a Band-Aid on it at this point is silly. Yeah.
Spencer writes in, "Gentlemen, the Bonfig assembly seems to come up quite often. Every time it does, it makes me wonder if it has ever been used on the top of roof rafters with high-density EPS. I believe that this would need to be engineered and not as much more than an inch thick unless you go with larger nails. But I wanted to use this to help with thermal bridging in a cathedral ceiling It allows me to add more depth to the framing members for insulation. I know nail base is a product that is used for this purpose, but that sounds too straightforward and well tested for me. Wanted to see if you wanted to weigh in on this idea. Thank you, Spencer. So didn't Rob Yeager do kind of a Bonfig assembly in his house, right?
Underneath the rafters.
But that's the interior, yeah.
And I don't know why. I mean, unless maybe this cathedral ceiling is already built and he doesn't want to, and he's doing work from the outside. I'm not sure why he wouldn't do this on the inside instead, because then you don't have to worry about that the weight issue.
Well, and the thing is, that whole Bonfig assembly idea is basically a solution for when you have a surface exposed and you just need to add depth. It's not like a start from scratch solution for framing a house.
Well, and it was. That's the original article.
Iteration, it certainly was.
Yeah,
those are new homes.
That's a builder who uses it as his new home approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, I mean, I agree with you, Rob. It seems like in the context of, since that article, it typically comes up in when it comes as comes to retrofits and adding depth. But yeah, Bonfig himself used it on new homes.
Do you think he listens to this show, and do you think he understands like how often we talk about his wall assembly? And
oh yeah, or goes to go to Green Building Advisor, and it's just the Bonfig wall is a well-known solution.
Well, to get back to this specific solution,
should we? This makes no sense.
No. What I was going to say is, there were people who've asked this question on GBA before, but not in the slivers of foam idea, but the idea of putting the actual foam across the rafters before putting the sheathing on top. And that's sort of missing some layers there. It's like you really want your sheathing attached directly to your rafters for structural reasons, to support the insulation. Maybe there's a way to engineer a way to do it, but it's sort of like a non-starter. It's like, why? It seems like you're going through trouble to do something that's more complicated than a lot of other solutions.
Yeah, and the sheathing, is what gives the sticks of the roof all of its strength, really. That diaphragm is what resists wind and shaking and all these things that it has to. And when you have something that's not rigid in between that, it just doesn't work the same.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to do this, there's one of the recent articles on or actually even that house that Ben was working on, where you do your sheathing and then you do a layer of foam, and then you do another layer of sheathing and a vented assembly above that. And that would make a lot more sense. Obviously, it's more expensive, but you've got a nice, sturdy, bulletproof assembly in a situation like that.
It is more expensive, and we do hear from lots of people who want to do exterior insulation on their roofs who simply can't find a contractor that will do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's problematic too. And ideally, you have a contractor that has some experience, although with this particular assembly, there's not a whole lot out there that do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Spencer, put the foam strips on the bottom of the rafters, or put a layer of continuous insulation on the outside of the sheathing. And there's a reason we don't get too creative with roof assemblies, because it's important, right? You don't want your house blowing down. So Jason wrote in with a very long email. I don't know if we're going to go through all of it here, but he starts off, "Hi, FHB podcast crew. My better half and I are preparing to embark on an attic renovation and HVAC update in our 1,500 square foot all brick Cape Cod built in 1941 in Richmond, Virginia." He makes the point that this is not a veneer house. It is all brick. An upcoming To the Studs attic renovation will be presenting us with some energy efficiency choices, and I'm looking for some help to sort them out. A regional environmental firm with a good reputation has recommended sealing the attic space with open cell foam. This would add to our previously existing plan to have this same company encapsulate the vented crawl space and small Michigan basement beneath the house using the same material in addition to a vapor barrier. Do you guys know what a Michigan basement is?
No, I didn't look that one up.
I didn't know what that is either.
Maybe it's just a basement in Michigan.
In his house in Richmond. This thing has got all kinds of problems. Starting with the basement is in Michigan. Using the same material in addition to a vapor barrier, depths will range from 6 inches on the all brick gable walls to up to 10 inches in the rafter bays. I've heard from the installer, but I'd like a second opinion. How safe is open cell foam for indoor air quality over the long term? My partner and I are middle-aged with no kids, but we plan to be in this house for the foreseeable future. The thought of this material, including the thermal paint applied at the end of installation, off-gassing or shredding whatever chemical behind our bedroom walls for years, doesn't feel great. But the energy efficiency and the quiet of a much better insulated house are very attractive. So what do we think about this first off? Is it okay to use open cell foam in a roof assembly for starters?
I know that some people say down south you can get away with it, but they're not quite far enough south, I don't think. And I don't even really know enough about what the parameters are that need to be met in order to make that work. But basically, open cell foam is going to transfer moisture up to that sheathing, potentially.
Yeah, there. I mean, from what I have seen, there have been lots of reports over the years of unvented roofs insulated with open cell foam having wet sheathing issues.
Because the open cell foams allows vapor transmission, unlike closed cell foam, which is a vapor barrier, right?
Right.
Now, he's got exposed mass brick walls up there, and that's a place where the open cell foam, that's one of the assemblies. We were talking recently about insulating brick walls, and that's one of the solutions is using open cell foam over a brick wall to allow some of that moisture to transfer through. But then he's also talking about putting intumescent paint over that. And I don't know if that changes everything, because it's going to be unfinished space in those outer areas of his house. And, that's going to change the vapor profile, I would imagine, of the foam.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
A regional environmental firm with a good reputation likely knows what the heck they're doing. Let's assume that. But it is risky to put open cell foam in unvented assemblies in cold places. Richmond may or may not be cold enough. We don't know, right? He goes on to ask about HVAC. This renovation also prevents a savings extinguishing opportunity for us to relocate the AC ducting and air handler from the basement to the attic. The current system is 20 plus years old. The ducting is shoddily installed massive flex, serving floor registers on the main floor and barely conditioning the attic via a large chase that is taking up a corner of our den. The new system would be designed and specified for whichever location we choose. If we move it to the attic, it could then be a snug fit in some places, but it would locate all the equipment in the space that would otherwise go unused and free up space in the basement, which functions as a small workshop area with some storage space. The system would be electrically dampened and serve the attic and first floor. So he's going to have a couple zones with one air handler is what it sounds like, right? If we leave it in the basement, we would install a conventional system to serve the first floor, basically a one-to-one replacement of the existing system, but updated and well-designed, and install a mini-split to serve the attic bedroom area with a transfer fan to condition the bathroom. We're waiting on quotes, but this option will almost certainly be less expensive. I think it is always better to have two pieces of equipment than to try to zone forced air systems, right? It just, to make the system big enough for both zones to be working at the same time, when only one is running, it is oversized by a significant amount, and it really can reduce comfort and system performance. I'm going to say there's an exception, though, because the modern heat pumps with variable refrigerant flow can, to some degree, solve this problem, and you only need one set of equipment. But that's expensive, too. What do you guys think?
Brian?
You going to put in two systems or one?
What Patrick said.
I don't know. He seems to have put a little more thought into this than we did. So,
you want two systems if you can, and a mini split upstairs is going to be great because most of the time during cooling season, the upstairs unit is going to be doing most of the work, and in the heating season, most of the work is going to be done by the basement air handler. So, I think two is better than one.
Yeah, and if he's going to have that well-insulated space up there, a nice, small, efficient mini split size to the space seems pretty reasonable.
And you got to pay attention to this design. Like maybe get that well-respected environmental firm to help size the equipment. Get an engineer, not an HVAC contractor, because they just don't put enough effort into appropriately sizing equipment, because they just learned that way, that you always make things bigger. And they've learned that because people say they don't want callbacks from comfort issues. But the reality is comfort issues are more likely a result of oversizing equipment.
Yeah, you want someone to do the manual J, the manual S, the manual D, all those calculations. You don't just want them to be saying, "Hey, this is what we do in a house like this," because the houses are, particularly older houses, right? They're very different and complex, and someone needs to put some thought into that.
And Jason is going to make this house significantly more energy efficient than any HVAC contractor is used to, right? He's going to put the same equipment that he always does in for a house that is going to perform much better than the ones he's used to working on, right?
Yeah, and then he's going to need to read your article on why he needs a dehumidifier because his oversized air conditioning unit isn't going to be taking the humidity levels down.
Right. And then you start running the air conditioner to do that, and then you make the house like 65 degrees, and it's very uncomfortable and clammy in there, right? Okay, so in addition to all this, we also hope to be able to afford to remove our current radiators and boiler system, and switch to the heating duties over to the new HVAC install. Radiators don't work especially well during our relatively mild winters, and the 22-year-old 165,000 BTU gas boiler is an incredible energy hog. It creates so much excess heat that we just left the door to the boiler room open most of the winter to contribute to the heating of the house. It's not optimal, as the boiler room is just off the kitchen and the door is in the way of everything. Would be much obliged for any thoughts and or suggestions from the team. Yins are doing a great job. Thanks much in advance, Jason. Jason must be from Pittsburgh, or he knows that I am, because have you guys ever heard that Yins?
Yeah. We've heard you bring that up before. Yeah. I looked up Michigan basement. Basically, it just means a basement that's kind of like not really a full height basement, often one that's been converted from a crawl space to make room to put mechanical equipment in.
What does Michigan come into it from?
I don't know. I couldn't find that.
So it's somewhere between a crawl space and a basement.
Yeah.
It's a short basement.
Yes.
Right.
Well, so isn't a crawl space a short basement?
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
A medium-sized basement.
I found a whole article about it on this one consulting firm's company. It's just called "What is a Michigan Basement?"
Are they in Michigan?
It doesn't say that. It says it says they're usually 5 feet to 7 feet tall.
Okay, well, one of the things I love about my job is I learn new stuff almost every day, and this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
So I hope we were helpful, Jason. You asked about the boiler. Yeah, get rid of the boiler. If it's oversized now and you do all this energy improvement work to your home, it's going to be ludicrous, right? You're going to have to open the windows to run the boiler.
Yeah, I mean, even in my leaky house, I did like some rough energy load calculations, and I need way less than 100,000 BTUs, and my house is bigger and leakier than his. So 165,000 BTUs in a well-insulated 1,500 square foot house. I don't think so. But
in Richmond.
Yeah.
In Richmond. That's the other part of it, right?
As far as the insulation goes, I mean, certainly if these people at this consulting firm or this energy firm are used to dealing with those kinds of structures in that area, I mean, we're not experts in that either. But like that's what the only thing I was thinking is like the closed cell on the roof, maybe not such a great idea. On the bricks,
you mean open cell?
I mean the open cell on the roof, not such a great idea. But on the walls, it might be a good solution.
Did he specify, just because maybe I missed it, did he specify whether this was a vented or unvented roof assembly?
It sounds to me like they want to make it unvented because they want to put this HVAC equipment in the knee walls, right? At least that's my hope.
Yeah, but it could still be vented if vented and insulated.
Sure.
Because I think it's important to be specific that the closed cell is problematic in an unvented roof assembly. When people are trying to do an unvented assembly, I think it has to be closed cell foam. If you were doing some site build, ventilation channels and spraying open cell in there, that might be fine.
Okay.
Because your sheeting would be able to dry.
That's really the nuts and bolts of this whole question, right? Is we don't want wet sheathing in any climate, right? An open cell will allow vapor movement, so that's why it's riskier.
Yeah.
So we've heard from a number of folks asking about how to get into high performance building. And interestingly, this week I heard from Gwen Brown, who's the communications director for the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And she says, "Dear Patrick, I hope this email finds you well. I thought your readers at Fine Homebuilding might be interested to know about a new resource released today to help connect workers with careers that relate to energy efficiency in buildings. The Green Buildings Career Map, developed with the support of the U.S. Department of Energy, features 55 jobs in energy efficiency for buildings across 4 industry sectors, including architecture and engineering, building operations and facilities management, commercial and residential construction and retrofitting. By helping job seekers learn about quality jobs related to energy efficiency in buildings, the Green Buildings Career Map will help foster a robust pipeline of qualified workers to meet employer demand. Employers can use it to support hiring. It can also be used by a wide range of other audiences, including job seekers, workers, school and career counselors, and training providers. Is this something you'd be interested in covering for Fine Homebuilding? Why, yes." What do you guys think? Did you look at the map?
Yeah, I looked at the little chart they had about which I thought was really cool, and it showed because it spreads out all the career options from entry level, mid level, and advanced, and then across different sectors of the industry. So it's kind of like playing bingo. You could just like sort of pick the level that you want to be at and the stuff you're interested in, and find a bunch of careers in that section.
I think it's a great idea. We've all bemoaned the lack of this kind of resource, so I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And if anyone is interested, it's greenbuildingscareermap.org, and of course we'll put that link on our podcast page too. So
very cool.
Yeah.
I have to admit, when I first saw the URL, I hadn't read your little write-up about it first, and you have to. I wish it wasn't Green Buildings. I wish it was Green Building, because if you read it wrong, it looks like it says Green Building Scare. But it's Green
Scare
Buildings.
Map. Oh, that was good.
But anyway.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys today. Thank you for being on the show.
Definitely.
Always fun.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Brian, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Keep craft alive.